Many people who work in the field of drug addiction treatment are giving a failing grade to the province's plan to force more people into drug treatment. And a rally is planned at City Hall in Kelowna to make the point.
We know that forced treatment does not work. And I mean, it's a frustrating policy because as of now, there already exists under the BC Mental Health Act the ability for people to be forcefully apprehended and put into treatment. So this is what a lot of people don't know. What the province is wanting to do is to expand this policy to make it basically a frontline tactic for, to basically apprehend people and force them into treatment. But I mean, it's a frustrating situation as an outreach worker who's been working in the field for years now, is that, I mean, people generally who are, experiencing issues around substance use, mental health, who are experiencing homelessness, they're very keen to access treatment. People want to get into treatment, want to get into detox, want to access mental health resources. But it's next to impossible for them to actually access these things. The wait lists are massive. You got to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. So, I mean, again, it's frustrating because we should really be, expanding voluntary treatment would be a really obvious thing. And even with voluntary treatment as it stands, the relapse rates are massive. I've read like 80 to 95% of people accessing voluntary treatment relapse within, I believe, a month or two after coming out of treatment. This is oftentimes because people don't have access to housing after treatment, and they're forced, or they're back into a situation where it's hopeless, and there's a housing crisis, these types of things.
Let me see if I'm summarizing it correctly then. Here we are talking about setting up facilities specifically to force people into treatment when you've already got people who are trying to address their addictions, who are lining up for treatment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like there most definitely are resources that exist, but they're wildly limited. There's not enough resources for the amount of demand that there is for voluntary treatment. Like, people want to access voluntary treatment. And then this isn't even to mention that, like, a core tenet of like 12-step programs, which is one of the most popular forms of, quitting substances, is that people need to want to change. They need to want to access treatment. So like this idea of forcing people into treatment against their will runs completely contrary to that core tenet of like one of the most beloved treatment programs out there.
And you're also making the argument that for people who are, their interaction with their drugs is so bad that they're actually a danger to themselves and the people around them. Well, there already are laws in place where they can be deprived of their liberty if that's what's going on.
Yeah, and perhaps that could be a necessary thing, but we have to remember that's an extremely rare case. And again, for most people, the crisis goes far beyond just substance use or addiction. Like we're dealing with crises of mental health, crises of a housing crisis, toxic drugs, things like this, that we need to be like talking about a safe supply of drugs. We need to be talking about affordable housing. We need to be talking about regulating treatment and actually like looking into how treatment is done now and making it a more pleasant experience for people.
I know that's a tough one for a lot of people to embrace, though, as necessary as it might be. Regulating some of these drugs, which really by and large are not good for people. And the idea of somebody sort of, going through it, labeling it, testing it, and putting it out there for people's use, it's sort of like handing it to people, something they shouldn't do. It's going to be tough to convince a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, like alcohol is a really good example of a regulated drug. Most people I know enjoy alcohol. It's important to note that alcohol statistically is far more harmful than drugs like heroin, cocaine, and meth when it comes to harm to oneself or harm to society. However, we regulate it and we give people the liberty to access a regulated supply. When I go out and buy a bottle of wine or a pack of beers, I'm not afraid that there's going to be rubbing alcohol in my beer, right? Whereas if I was going to want to buy a thing of cocaine, say, if I was a person who was buying cocaine, I am totally afraid of there being something toxic in it. So it's not...
There could be fentanyl in there.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, the fact is that people use drugs, people use alcohol and we're totally okay with regulating it. I wonder, like, why aren't we talking about, like forcing, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, when I first heard there was going to be this rally opposed to this, movement towards forcing more people into treatment, I guess the element that didn't come to mind right away is that you're also saying, sure, increase treatment, but for people ready or who are seeking it.
Yeah, I mean, like, people have been calling for this for decades and decades. This is nothing new. People who are living outside are calling for easier access to treatment. They just don't want to be forced into treatment that is unregulated and oftentimes isn't going to help them and just leave them traumatized and wanting to avoid the medical system going forward.
Okay, so tell us about this rally. It's at City Hall?
Yeah, tomorrow, Friday, October 18th, 1 p.m. at City Hall. We're going to be centering people with living experience, who have had experience with, being criminalized for their substance use, things like this. And yeah, it's basically to raise awareness to the public, to challenge the policy.
And people won't be hearing necessarily people like you and I speaking for them. These will be people living with homelessness speaking for themselves.
Most definitely, yeah. I think this is another frustrating aspect of this, is that politicians kind of use this as like a political talking point to get votes, it seems. And it seems to get a lot of support, but really we should be like listening to experts, whether those are like, people in the medical system, or, the real experts are people with lived experience. Like, I'm a core believer that people themselves know what they need in order to get better and in order to survive. So yeah, if you want to come out and support people with lived and living experience, accessing these systems, or navigating these systems, come out tomorrow, 1 p.m.
Terrific. Thanks. Really appreciate it, Tony Baxter. And thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.